It's been almost 2 decades since we started our journey to educate and help you take action so you may better manage your financial future. Our goal is to help you accomplish your life's purpose. This podcast reveals financial tips, strategies, and insights that will help you to set your financial goals and guide you along the way. This is Managing Your Financial Future, brought to you by the advisors at Lucia Capital Group. Well, welcome back. Thanks for joining us once again. Wonderful to have subscribers. If you're just wondering, if you just wandered on this podcast, Managing Your Financial Future, I'm Johnny Dean, podcast host, and I'm here with Professor Rick Plum, certified financial planner, professional type that he is. But you can subscribe to us on Spotify. I should mention that right at the top, because people want to know, how do you subscribe? Well, if you found this podcast, it should be fairly easy. You go to Spotify and become a subscriber and become a friend of the show, and you can ask us questions. You go to luciacap.com. Professor Plum, welcome. It's been a while since we've done actual emails.
Okay.
I may want to do that again, but we have a lot of questions. You get topics and questions from people, clients that you meet with a lot. And one of the things that we talked about not too long ago had to do with buying real estate.
With your IRA specifically was what the podcast was.
Yeah, specifically buying real estate should you buy it in your IRA? And I think we kind of determined...
Well, if possible, there's maybe better ways to do it. Buying it personally, use the IRA to make the payments, and so you're using the IRA money. You're just getting a little bit more tax efficiency out of it.
Right. So you're getting the IRA to pay for it, but you're not losing.
But you're not buying it inside the IRA.
Yes, you're not giving up those benefits, because there are a lot of potential benefits for owning real estate personally, and there's a lot of talk about real estate now. I guess, again, because of
because its pricing is crazy.
It's more than nuts. I mean, we saw this in 2008, but I think a lot of this in 06, 07, a lot of this had to do with those subprime mortgages and
there was a lot of money being able to chase houses. People that had never bought houses, people that hadn't had the financial education, basically. Money was kind of a foreign object to them. Now they've got these easy loans where they can fog a mirror, get a loan, and they worry about making the payments later. Just bidding the houses out of sight.
So I would think that this is different. This current real estate boom is different in the sense that it's not being fueled by
ridiculous. Well, mortgage rates are very low. Now you still have to qualify for a mortgage. That's what's different. The rates today are lower than they were back in 2007-8.
But it seems to be a question of supply and demand. What causes inflation, Professor Plum? It is lack of supply.
Too many dollars chasing too few goods.
Right. So it's lack of supply. That's what's going to cause inflation. If you have too much supply and not enough demand, well, of course, the prices are going to come down. So now the supply has been, for various reasons in various regions, also been limited. So that's what we're seeing. And then, supply of lumber and all that other stuff. It's just creating problems for people who want to buy a lower home. So I don't see this personally coming crashing down. I could be wrong, but I don't see it.
Not for the same reasons that came down last time.
No, and I look back, if you remember, and I don't know about other regions, but if you remember back in the 1970s, I'm going to speak about California personally because we moved to California in the early 70s, and by the end of the decade, just 6, 7, 8 years, about 8 years later, home prices in the area had tripled, if not more.
And then they went up quite a bit through the 80s, too.
And they never went down. And they never went down again.
Well, 89 we saw a peak, and it went down to about 94, 95, and it dropped about 25% in those years. I know this because I bought a house in 96 that had originally sold for about 30% more than what I paid for it.
Oh, sure. So it is cyclical, but I don't know if we're in one of those late 70s type, early to late 70s type runs. I just don't know. But I also know that during that 1970s period, we went from fairly low, relatively low, or moderately low interest rates to, by 1980, people were paying 13%, 14%.
It was real easy to calculate your mortgage back then. I mean, it was basically, if you're getting $100,000 mortgage, it's $1,000 a month. I mean,
yeah, it made it easy. Absolutely,
hard
made
to make
easy.
the payment, but easy to figure out the payment.
Well, of course, but you were also earning 12% on a T-bill or something. Yeah. I mean, it was crazy time. So the topic here at hand does have to do with buying real estate. I'm going to stick to buying your personal home or maybe a vacation home. But
not rental investment property.
No, although I guess you could. I think there are different people buy those for different reasons. So the question is, and you've had this question before from people that you've met with. This was another one that had come up, and I thought we'd talk about it, which is, do I pay cash if I have the cash for a home, or do I get a mortgage at today's fairly historically low rates?
Well, it doesn't even have to be if I'm buying a property. There's a lot of people that are looking at retirement not too many years away or very close, next week or something, and they're saying, I don't really want to go into retirement with a mortgage. I don't want to carry this expense with me into retirement. I'll be able to retire a lot easier if I don't have this expense. Should I pay off this mortgage, or should I refinance it to a 15 or a 30-year mortgage, or what should I do? I don't want to move. Or I am buying a new place, my new forever house, 5 years before retirement. Do I pay cash for it? Do I take out a 30-year mortgage? Do I take out a 15-year mortgage? I mean, people that are maybe a little bit further out, maybe 10 years out from retirement, are saying, I'll do a 15-year mortgage. Mm-hmm. So which way? And there's going to be two sides to this discussion. One is the financial side. What makes the most financial sense? And then there's the other side, which will probably make the decision up for you one way or the other, regardless of what the finances come out to be. That's the emotional side. How do I feel about having the mortgage? How do I feel about making a payment? And so that's where most people actually make their decision, on the emotional side, not the financial side.
Yeah, does owning a home outright feel better to me? Am I more secure?
Right. And
personally, emotionally, having a home that I own that nobody can take away from me for lack of mortgage payment.
Right. And it comes down to also, I know what my Social Security is going to be. I know what my pension is going to be if I have one. And I know what my portfolio can support from a cash flow standpoint. And if my mortgage is $2,000 a month, the principal and interest, if I didn't have that $2,000 a month, that income that I show coming in from these other sources would feel a lot more comfortable.
It sure would. I mean, getting down to the cash flow issue. And
that's where this comes in. For retirees, it's very much a cash flow issue.
You know what I'm seeing, to put this in a hypothetical but still real world type of scenario? I'm seeing this from people that are living in California who are retiring, and they've got $700,000-$800,000 in some cases of equity built up into their home. And they're selling their California home, and they're moving to Texas. They're moving to somewhere where Texas's real estate has come up, but somewhere
everybody's real estate has come up, just not as much as California.
But it's relative. California and other high equity places, and they're moving to areas where they can potentially pay cash for a home. Maybe a very nice home for half the price. And their question is,
should I take a mortgage on it, or should I pay cash?
Because, I'm going to pocket $700,000 out of the sale of my home after some capital gains taxes.
And I can buy a place for $500
or $300 in some cases. Maybe I want to go smaller because I'm retired, or one story or something. So what do I do? Well, let's talk about each of these briefly.
Well, again, it has a lot to do with how do you feel about having a mortgage. I mean, it depends on what you're going to do with the cash if you don't put it against the house. So you've got this money that you could, $300,000 you could put towards the house. Or you could put $60,000 down and get a $240,000 mortgage, and you still have $240,000 of assets that you can do something with. What are you going to do with that? Are you the type that would sit it in a CD? Well, if you're just going to stick it in a CD, I'd be putting it against the house and saving the difference in the cost of the mortgage.
Because the CD isn't really paying you anything.
No. And on the other, I looked at a 3-year CD from my local credit union, and it was 0.7%. Locked in, guaranteed for 3 years.
You might as well have a sign outside the bank that says, go home.
So it has a lot to do with what you also, if you have a mortgage, where are you going to make the payment? Where is the money going to come from to be able to make that payment? if my entire nest egg is that $300,000, and
you mean from the sale of
from the sale of the property,
from the sale of the property.
If I have to take that $240,000 that I didn't put against the house because I got a mortgage and turn it into a cash flow to be able to make the payment, that's tough to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because the cash flow is higher than the interest rate because you're making principal and interest out of it. So it's difficult to run your portfolio that way. On the other side, if I've got pensions and Social Security and I can make that payment on that $240,000 mortgage without much trouble, without having to use every dime of the earnings from that $240,000, in today's, as you mentioned, pretty historically low interest rates, if you can lock into a 30-year 3%, 3.25% maybe, mortgage
or lower.
I don't know what they are today.
2 3/4, I think you could still get. I don't know.
Call it 3%, just for easy math. In the not too distant future, maybe 5-10 years from now, maybe we go back to CDs making 3% and 4%. I don't know, but I think that as long as you are allowing yourself to be somewhat of an investor, where you can make the payment easily from other sources, you could invest the money in. So that's from the financial side. I have met people that are very comfortable with that payment. I've met people that no matter what the numbers are, I hate payments. Get me the heck away from payments. I don't want a payment. I don't care what it is. And so they're not even asking the question because they know better. They're not going to do a payment. They're just going to pay cash. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It has to do with, let's find the answer for you and what fits for you. But it comes down to, from a financial standpoint, what would you do with the money if you don't put it against the house? And what is the cost of the mortgage? From an emotional standpoint, how do you feel about payments? Now, we were talking earlier about our own mortgages, a couple days ago, and I've gotten to the point where if I get my mortgage down low enough before I retire, I may refinance it for 30 years at that point, just so that I can impound my taxes and insurance, and I can have one easy payment that I never have to think about again. I can even set it up on automatic.
Be nice and low.
And I wouldn't, and I want it to be low because I don't want to have to deal with the cash flow in retirement.
Yeah.
But I may not want to pay it off because I may want the simplicity of that impound.
The purists would just scream at that, Professor Plum, who would say, "Wait a minute, you were within, I don't know, 100,000 of paying off your mortgage, and you're only a few years away, and you're 65, and you're gonna take a mortgage out till you're 95. Are you nuts?"
Well, I've been called nuts before, but in this case, it has more to do with convenience than it has to do with the financial side of it. It's not that I think that it's a great investment one way or the other. It's a pure convenience, so that when I'm traveling, I don't have to worry about, property taxes are due next week. I got to make sure I got to move it from my savings over to my checking so I can make the payment. Yada, yada. I don't even have to think about it. And so in that case, convenience is overriding. Now, I haven't done it yet, but I don't know. When I get there, I might.
I can't believe you don't have an impound now.
I don't have an impound right now. I do pay my taxes myself.
You write a check or whatever.
I pay it online, but yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I can't remember my reasoning other than I just haven't.
Well, the old reasoning used to be don't give the bank an interest-free loan.
But the impound accounts pay interest now.
See, to me, the convenience of it is wonderful.
And maybe someday when I get to the point where I'm not at the office every day and I'm not, if I'm on the road, because I would like to go on a 3 or 4 month road trip.
Oh, me too.
Without any actual destination planned.
Yeah, just be gone.
Yeah, just Route 66 for a couple days. Do this.
Oh, this looks interesting. Yeah. Let's stay there for a week.
We did this. My wife and I did this 3 or 4 years ago. We were traveling to Yellowstone, and we were in southern Idaho. We're just driving. We had some time because we planned out some things, and there was a sign that said "Ice Cave." 4 miles down this dirt road. It's like, well, what the heck is an ice cave? And it's just what it said. It's a
cave of ice.
That because of the way it was created, it created its own ice. Even though it was 105 degrees that day out on the flat areas of southeastern Idaho, it was ice. It was great to explore. And then a little further on, saw another sign for something. Let's down this dirt road. Let's go check that out.
Well, and that's your dream to do that.
That's fun.
Yeah, that is fun.
For me.
I would agree. I would agree with that. But now to relate this,
but I don't want to have to worry about what payments are coming due this month. What payments are coming? Do I have to think about this? I want to be on autopilot at that point.
Well, you should be. You should be. I would think. Now, what you said though was important when we're trying to consider a mortgage versus paying cash. What are you going to do with that money? I mean, if you have let's call it a 3% mortgage, let's say I have a $300,000 home. I put $60,000 down, to use your example. So I got $240,000 of cash left. I have a 3% mortgage. That $240,000 of cash left that I could have put toward the mortgage but didn't, I should, from a financial standpoint, be able to invest that at something greater than the cost of the mortgage. So
over the life of the mortgage.
Over the 30 years, let's say I get a 30-year mortgage.
As long as I don't have to make the payment from a distribution from that portfolio.
Right. It has to go. It has to be untouchable.
Pretty much, yeah. So if you can invest, now I've talked to people that the mortgages are worth $300, maybe a little less, and they have money in the bank, and they could pay it off.
Yeah.
And their question is, should I pay it off? Okay. What would you do with that money in the bank if you don't pay it off? Are you going to leave it in the bank, or would you invest it? I've had people say, no, we're going to leave it in the bank because we just don't trust.
Just sit there in a savings or CD or whatever.
And they have enough for emergency fund over and above this. So it's like, use that to pay off the house. You're earning, what's the tantamount to 3%? Because you're not paying interest. You're not earning any interest right now. So, on the other side, oh no, if we'll take that and invest it for the next 10, 15 years. Okay, keep the mortgage, get a new one at 3% or whatever, but invest the money.
Are there downsides to owning the home outright? I'm talking not about a rental, because I could see some downsides to owning a rental for liability, but your own home or your vacation home.
Especially if it's a house, your forever house, the value, if it comes down, what's it matter to you? You're going to stay there whether the value goes up or the value goes down. So I don't see any real downside.
Unless it's your only asset and you need the cash.
Well, no, and everybody's different, but I've met a lot of people that were able to pay off their houses in their 40s, 45, 40, maybe late 40s, and now they've got lots of money and they're saving and they're doing all kinds of things. And I've never found somebody, it doesn't mean they don't exist, that regretted paying off their house.
Once it's done, I could see that. But if you're in your 40s, I've known people who put all their extra money toward paying down the home. Their mortgage payment was $1,500 a month or something, and they're putting $3,000 a month away because they want to work toward it. And I don't personally, I don't know that I would do that. I would think that you could take that extra money and maybe earn a little bit better than what you're getting on the mortgage. How long
it's going to be. If you're sitting in a position where your mortgage is $1,500, you're putting an extra $300-400 a month against it, so you're going to take a 30-year mortgage and turn it into a 23-year mortgage.
Yeah.
No, take that $300 or $400 a month, put it in a Roth IRA for the 23 years. If it's going to take you more than 10 or 15 years to pay it off, 15 years, invest the money. But if you're in a position where you're by paying the extra, you're within 2 or 3 years, 4 years maybe, I don't have a problem paying down the mortgage and getting it gone in 3 or 4 years.
Oh, no.
It's, again,
I guess
time horizon driven.
Absolutely. I'm thinking more of somebody who's in their 30s. And
if somebody can have their house paid off in 3 years in their 30s.
But if they're going to have it paid off, they have a 30-year mortgage, but they're putting extra principal, and they want to have it paid off in 15. To me,
15 years is an adequate time horizon to invest it, put it in Roth IRAs. And that 30-year-old, 15 years from now, they may not even want to be in that same house. That's not their forever house.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. And what if they need that money? What if somebody loses their job and they've been putting all their savings that they could have?
Well, you've got to have adequate savings outside of this. You got to have an emergency fund. You've got to have your disability insurance. You got to have everything else in place. Now it's a question of, I have this extra money, do I invest it or do I put it against the house? And I think it's time horizon driven to a lot of extent, in that if it's still going to take you 15 plus years to get the house paid off, invest it. If it's going to be 2-3 years before you can have the house paid off, pay the house off.
So I don't want to throw water on the idea that owning your home at age 40 or 45 because you worked for 15 years.
Most people are not in that position to pay it off at 40, 45.
They're probably not. I personally would like to see, and this is not because I'm not an advisor, but I personally would like to be able to have access to that money if I need it, rather than putting it toward a fairly cheap these days mortgage. Now this brings up the other question. Talked about 15-year versus 30. Time was when when you had a 30-year mortgage that was at 9%.
And the 15 was
and
at
the 15
6?
was
I
at
don't know.
6.
Yeah.
I look at that and I say, well, if I have the extra cash, the 15 probably makes sense.
But you've got to make sure you have the stable inflow to be able to continue making that payment, and you don't have any bad months.
Because it's a much higher payment.
Well, but when you get that big disparity in interest rates, the payment isn't that dramatically different. But today's world, you're talking about a 15 at 2 3/4 versus a 30 at 3. You're only talking about a quarter point difference.
How could that? What's your reward?
The interest is not that much, and the payment is dramatically different. And I would rather have the flexibility that if I had a bad month, I could. Let's say I could always get a 30 and pay it like a 15, but I can't have a 15 and then have a month where I don't like the payment and pay it as a 30.
Yeah, they don't like that.
So I like the flexibility of dropping to that lower payment if you have a bad month where you have to, you got all kinds of expenses this month. So rather than hit a credit card or something else, I just won't make the extra payment against the mortgage. I'll, fix the car or whatever.
Yeah, which tends to happen to people, I think, in their 30s and 40s.
It happens to people at all ages.
Well, it does, but I think somebody who's maybe closer to retirement may have some other funds to access. And again, I'm speaking generically. This is certainly not true of everybody. But I found that in my 30s, I had less available cash than I do now.
Yeah. It's all about cash flow. It's all about the ability to maintain what you're trying to accomplish. It's all about flexibility. I like having options. Right now, as you mentioned, the quarter point difference between the 15 and 30 really isn't enticing enough to make me lock into that much higher payment. I can always make a higher payment. I can always add principal to my monthly payment.
Sure.
Or make multiple payments during the month. I don't have to have a special program that they charge me for every payment to make a bi-monthly mortgage.
What was
bi-weekly.
Have you seen these bi-weekly?
I haven't seen them lately.
These were fairly big 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Where they would the idea was to pay twice.
Well, you pay every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, which means that now you have
it's effectively making 13 monthly payments. Because you make 26 payments of half the payment amount, and you took your 30-year mortgage from 30 years down to like 26 years.
And what was the point of doing that? I mean, the point was you did lose that cash flow.
Well, because you were paying your mortgage. Look at all the interest you're saving. They never talk about how much interest you're not earning with the money you could have been investing.
Yeah, that's
but they
true.
also, back when they first came, were really popular. They were charging you like $300 or $400 to set it up, and they were charging you like $10 or $15 per payment as a handling charge.
Yeah,
and it was like, well, that just kind of negated the whole purpose of it.
What do I need you for? I mean, I could make a 13th payment if I want to, just on my own, and have it not cost a dime.
You don't even have to make a 13th payment. You can just say,
spread it out.
Multiply it out. What would I have paid biweekly, and just divide that extra amount by 12 and add it to my each monthly payment.
Yeah, and I can do that for free.
All for free.
Yeah. What was the other one that we used to see?
The green mortgage?
The green loan or the green mortgage?
It was made.
Do we see those a lot?
No, I don't see them at all anymore.
Okay,
they were really a nice idea. They were basically an interest only, where you took 100% of your paychecks, 100% of all your earnings, and you put it into the mortgage, and then you drew from the mortgage like a line of credit for your monthly expenses. And so you didn't have a checking account. You didn't leave any money sitting in cash accounts earning nothing. You paid it all against the mortgage as much as possible, which in theory lowered your monthly outstanding balance, lowered your interest payments. But the idea was it was a very flexible line of credit, if anything. And people, when they have that flexibility, they screwed up. I mean, I'm sorry, it happens.
Yeah.
They would take more money out than they put in, and the mortgage actually grew rather than going down. So unfortunately, I knew a couple people that had these, and everyone I knew that had one ended up owing more rather than less a year, 2, 3 years later.
Yeah, so those are, I haven't seen them.
The flexibility was what killed them. The flexibility was the drawing point to them. It was the nice idea, but it's like the old universal life insurance where you could make a payment or not make a payment if you had cash value. And the flexibility, most people screwed them up because they said, well, I got cash and I don't have to make a payment this month. And then the next thing you know, it blows up.
Because they've decided over the next 5-6 months that they couldn't make the payment. the point that you made before about going into retirement with a mortgage, you don't see that as a good or bad thing. You see it more as an emotional.
It's very much emotional. It's also very much how you've set yourself up. There are people, unfortunately, we see people buying their forever homes that are just too dadgum expensive. They can barely afford it while they're working, let alone once they actually retire. And so they go from the house that they raised the kids in, that it was fun and all, but now they want their forever home, but it's like 25-30% even more expensive than the house that they're getting rid of.
They moved up?
They move up. I have seen a trend lately, not everybody, but a significant minority percentage is buying up.
So we went from a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom, and I have 2 people living in the house.
Or it may be a smaller house, but instead of being out in the rural areas, it's on the beach.
Yeah,
it's in the mountains that are, overlooking the. It's a more expensive place, whatever the case may be. It's a much more desirable location, and so now they're carrying a bigger mortgage than they had before into retirement. And the question is, can you afford it? Now, some people obviously can, and some people really should think about that before they buy the house. They buy it 10 years before retirement, thinking everything's roses, and then all of a sudden they get to retirement saying, oh, man, this payment is going to kill me.
Yeah, and that's where the idea of going into a mortgage, going to retirement with a mortgage
is a problem.
Is going to be a problem. The idea used to be, my parents, my grandparents, there was always the mortgage burning party,
Oh, yeah.
Don't ever... And they came from the Depression and all that stuff. But
it's back when a mortgage was $2,000 too, not a month.
the whole balance. That's right. Actually, you're not far off. It was $11,000. That's the number that stuck in my.
That was the purchase price.
The purchase price was $11,000, and I think the payment was $120.
It's all relative. Wages were obviously very much lower than they are today.
Well, I've thought about this too. Okay, so. It was you could buy. I checked with my dad, and I think in 1966 in North Glen, Denver, Colorado, they paid for a 5-bedroom house. They paid $13,000, and I said, "Wow, that was cheap." And he said, "Yeah, but you got to understand, I was only making about $24,000 a year, And I said, "Okay, so you were making double what your house cost
outright.
So if I had a $300,000 home which if you can't in California, but somewhere."
Be like making
I'd be making $600,000. Is that?
Well, and I looked at my parents bought a house in 1965, and it was about 1 time's annual salary.
Yeah. Okay.
Where we were.
Well, even so.
And if you're looking at the same house today, you'd have to be making a lot more than a high income 2-income family is making. You'd have to be making almost $700,000 a year to buy that same house.
Yeah,
because I think that house is $700,000 or $800,000 now.
It's incredible.
I mean, even a dual income household, that's a rare income level.
Where are the starter homes anymore?
Well, it depends. Not in California.
Well, where anywhere almost. I mean, you used to be able to buy a 1,000 square foot, 1,200 square foot, pretty cheap house. And live there for 2 years and sell it and then move up.
I know we're regional, and I know our area of housing is ridiculous, but I saw a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 750 square foot house today in a okay area. Nothing, you didn't necessarily have to have bars on the windows, but it's $585,000.
And that's actually sounds almost cheap.
That's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but. Again, supply and demand. Well, okay, so you don't have a problem so much with having a mortgage in retirement.
I just want to know where the payment's going to come from.
And if you are going to pay cash for a home, do so. But if you want to have a mortgage, if it comes down between pay cash or do a mortgage, the question to you, Professor Plum, is what are you doing with the money you would have put down for the home?
Exactly. What are you going to do with that money?
And if it's just going to sit there earning 0.0%, you might like to see it pay off the mortgage.
Right, because then you're earning what you're not paying in interest.
By paying it off, you're earning, in essence,
the 3% on that outstanding balance that's not outstanding.
Because it's not going out. You're keeping the 3%, which is tantamount to earning it.
I'm not paying the bank.
That's right. That's right. Just to sort of encapsulate this. Great topic. We've talked, I'd like to maybe in the next couple of weeks talk again about this idea of having the Roth make the payment. You alluded to it a little bit. It's a mortgage strategy that I love. I love that idea. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next couple of weeks. But if you want to know more about strategies with your mortgage, maybe this is bugging you. Maybe you need to know, well, I've got some cash to pay off my home. Is it a wise idea?
Where's the cash coming from? Is it in your IRA or is it in your personal account?
Well, if it's going to cost,
that's a big difference.
It is, because if it's going to cost you a ton in taxes, you may not want to do it. So, that's stuff that you go over with an advisor like Professor Plum. 800-644-1150. You could talk to him or any of the Lucia Capital Group advisors about decisions like these. These are not everyday decisions, but they're common decisions that people have to make, especially going into retirement. For those who say, I've heard I'm not supposed to have a mortgage in retirement, and I've still got 7 or 8 years left. What do I do with this? I've got some cash. Is it a good idea to pay it off? It's all part of the planning process. 800-644-1150. You can also reach us at Lucia Cap, LuciaCap, LuciaCap.com. Lucia Capital Group, our sponsor, and provides us people like me and Professor Plum. Spotify, if you want to, if you want to subscribe to our podcast, please do go to Spotify. You can get our weekly podcast, get it downloaded, and we're on our 6th season now, or 7th, I forget. I think it's our 6th season. You can get all the podcasts right there. Don't forget to subscribe. For Professor Plum, what's your name?
Plum.
Plum with an L? For Professor
Not a
Plum.
B.
I'll fix that in post. No, I won't. For Professor Rick Plum, certified financial planner professional, I'm Johnny Dean, your podcast host. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you again next time.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. To the extent that this material concerns tax matters, it is not intended or written to be used and cannot be used by a taxpayer for the purpose of avoiding penalties that may be imposed by law. Each taxpayer should seek independent advice from a tax professional based on his or her individual circumstances. Different types of investments and or investment strategies involve varying levels of risk, and there can be no assurance that any specific investment or investment strategy, including the investments purchased and or investment strategies devised by LCG, will either be suitable or profitable for a client's or prospective client's portfolio. Thus, investments may result in a loss of principal. Accordingly, no client or prospective client should assume that the presentation or any component thereof serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from LCG or from any other investment professional. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. This material was gathered from sources believed to be reliable. However, its accuracy cannot be guaranteed. IRA withdrawals will be taxed at ordinary income rates. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may also be subject to a 10% penalty tax. Roth IRA distributions of principal from a Roth IRA are tax-free. However, any earnings will be taxed at ordinary income rates, and a 10% penalty tax will apply if withdrawn prior to age 59.5 or within 5 years of the date the Roth IRA was established, whichever is longer. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. The information provided is based on current laws, which are subject to change at any time. Lucia Capital Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. CDs are FDIC insured up to $250,000 per depositor per insured bank for each account ownership category. Insurance services offered through LPL Financial or its licensed affiliates. California Insurance License number 0518721. Universal Life, UL Insurance, is a form of permanent life insurance with an investment savings element. The price tag on Universal Life Insurance is the minimum amount of a premium payment required to keep the policy. Beneficiaries only receive the death benefit. Rick Plum is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.